If you care about the sanctity of the DOJ, this is a big deal. I've gone through this 1,000 times. Nothing like this happened during the Biden administration, where the president steps in and overrides the U.S. attorney in order to prosecute political enemies. So there is a hearing that just wrapped up in the last few hours over the way that the grand jury indictment moved forward against Comey. And before we get to the biggest screw up by the DOJ, let's first talk about a back and forth that the judge had with a lawyer representing the government. And the judge had some very tough questions for the DOJ lawyer named Tyler Lemons. The judge started by asking, she started making a presentation, whether Clemens knew if there was what's called a declination memo. And a declination memo is a memo where the department writes up an explanation for why it decided not to prosecute someone, declining to prosecute. And the judge wanted to know, was there a declination memo? Because the Comey team has asked for it if it exists. Now, it's a controversial question as to whether to release it to them, right? Internal memos within the DOJ typically are not something that are made public. But in this case, where the very claim is that the DOJ decided not to prosecute and Trump stepped in and is engaging in a malicious prosecution now, it could be much more relevant than in a typical case. Now, here's how the back and forth went, and the end of this is kind of amazing. The judge asks, was there a declination memo? Lemons sort of dodges, tells the court over the course of an investigation, there are a variety of written memos, and said whether or not the document exists is a privileged matter. The judge wasn't having it. Judge follows up. Was there a declination memo? Could be answered yes or no, the judge said. I don't know the world of what documents exists, Lemons said. You did not seek to find out whether there was a declination memo, the judge asked. And here Lemons finally says he's aware of written correspondence. I mean, these guys are trying to snooker, right? Finally, Lemons tells the court he did actually try to find out the answer about whether a declination memo existed. He did find the answer, but that he was under instructions from Todd Blanche's office, the Deputy Attorney General, not to disclose the answer. Quote, what is it that the office of the Deputy Attorney General told you cannot say, the judge asked. Lemons sort of hemmed and hawed and dodged and basically said he was aware of various memos, etc. So, and at another point where the defense arguments have centered specifically on Trump's words, Comey's attorney, Michael Dreeben, said the president has declared himself the top law enforcement officer of the United States and essentially, quote, subbed himself for the U.S. attorney as the decision maker. The judge says, so your argument is that Ms. Halligan, Lindsay Halligan, who I'm going to talk about in a moment, is a stalking horse or a puppet doing the president's bidding? He said, well, she took the job to carry out the president's directives. So, look, of course we know there was a declination memo. Of course we know that the previous U.S. attorney decided not to prosecute Comey, and that's why he got fired. This is a big deal. If you care about the sanctity of the DOJ, this is a big deal. And don't give me the, well, what happened under the Biden administration. I've gone through this 1,000 times. I'm happy to dig into exactly what happened during the Biden administration. Nothing like this happened during the Biden administration, where the president steps in and overrides the U.S. attorney in order to prosecute political enemies. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. Merrick Garland had decided not to prosecute Trump. The left was furious. The reason that Trump didn't get charged until mid-2022 was because of the documents case, because he was hiding classified marked documents, and he was lying about it. That's the most important point. That's the reason, because then he had to appoint a special counsel. He appointed a special counsel with regard to Biden as well, a Republican. So this case is over, this Comey case. Look, I predicted weeks ago it was a 95% chance they wouldn't have a conviction. I think there's a 99% chance now, because I think there's now a much more than 50% chance that it'll be dismissed before it goes to trial. We'll see. I'm not saying that there's a 95% chance it'll be dismissed, but I'm saying, because, what they may do is say this was done improperly, and the government, could in theory have the opportunity to do it again. But that case is a mess. Now, that isn't even the worst thing that happened in the proceeding. All right. The judge then calls Lindsay Halligan to the stand to confirm whether the grand jury actually saw the indictment charging Comey. And Halligan confirms that no, the full grand jury did not see the indictment, only the foreperson and another grand juror. She said the grand jury saw the original indictment that was presented, the one that had 3 counts. The grand jury did not indict on one of the 3 counts, but the indictment that charges Comey, that is currently on the court docket, was not reviewed by the grand jury. Yeah. What? I mean, Todd Blanche gives the order not to tell the judge whether there was a declination memo. Okay, that's bad. But the government acknowledging that the grand jury didn't hear or sign off specifically on the second indictment? I mean, again, I don't see how the case continues. I don't. I'll say 85% chance it gets dismissed before it goes to trial. 85 to 90. I think maybe I'm being conservative. But wow, this is what happens when you put a second-rate insurance lawyer in charge of a U.S. attorney's office, is you get like really basic mistakes that are made.